Hi, this is Amy Trask, and you're listening to the Cleats Off podcast with Liz Bhandari.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Cleats Off podcast. I'm your host Liz Bhandari, and this is a show that brings you closer to the game you love. Today's guest is the super talented wearer of many hats, Amy Trask. Amy is an analyst for CBS Sports, the author of the book You Negotiate Like a Girl, chairman of the board at BIG3, and is the former CEO of the Raiders. Enjoy the show. Fresh out of university, you interned at the Los Angeles Raiders and then skipped forward 14 years, having gained experience elsewhere. You were appointed as chief executive. Was becoming the NFL's first ever female CEO something you ever expected could happen?
It wasn't something I thought about. As you just noted, I did an internship while I was in graduate school. When I left, and my internship was roughly 2 years, maybe a little bit less. It was more than 1 year, maybe close to 2. Graduated, went to work, and then a year or so later joined the Raider organization full time. And I didn't have a particular goal or plan in mind for while I was with the organization. In other words, people ask me, well, what was your plan? What was your strategy? I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a strategy. I was so thrilled to be part of the organization and part of the team. I would have been delighted to contribute in any manner I could. If my responsibility was standing on the sideline and picking up squished up cups off the ground during a game, I would have done that to the best of my ability. So I didn't have a particular plan or strategy. I worked very, very hard. I learned the organization. And, if we count my internship, although there was about a year of a gap between my internship and starting full time, if we count it all, I was there roughly almost 30 years.
Wow, that's amazing. And do you think a career in law is something that helped you prepare for football, or do you think that was just something that was natural to you anyway?
Well, I went to law school not with the intent of ever practicing law.
Wow.
I went to law school for the background it would give me in business and otherwise. And it did give me a tremendous background for business. And I did use my law degree, but I went in thinking I am not going to be a practicing lawyer. And I sure as heck am not going to be a trial lawyer. I went for the education, and the education was tremendously beneficial in business. The other thing I'll note is when I started with the Raiders, I was an intern in the early part of the 80s. I joined full time in the mid 80s. And there weren't other women doing that at the time. And the reason I note that was I thought that law school might give me a little bit of extra gravitas in whatever career I pursued. And it may have. So I really, really went for the education. And that's what I tell my nieces, my nephews, everybody in my village who asks, get an education for the purpose of getting an education.
Yeah. And you mentioned, obviously at the time, very few females in the area. Do you think there were any, I guess, barriers that were put in your way during your time in your career at the Raiders?
It's a terrific question. And again, I share by way of perspective because many of your fans and people who enjoy your work and are listening to this weren't even born when I started my career in the National Football League. And yes, it kind of scares me to say that, but it's true. Many people listening to this weren't born back then. So I will note that when I did attend my first NFL owners meeting, I was the only woman in the room. And that has changed over time. There are some terrific women who joined the league while I was part of the league and have joined since. But I'm asked very, very often, precisely what you just referenced. Do I believe that I was tested because I was a woman? Do I believe that obstacles were thrown in my way because I was a woman? And the answer is, I don't know if I was tested because I was a woman. People are tested all the time. They're tested because of their race, their gender, their age, their educational background, their seniority. But let's assume that I was tested because I was a woman, because that is a reasonable assumption. Well, what's the best answer when we're tested? What's the best thing to do when you're tested? Pass the test. Yeah. Pass the damn test. So I didn't spend my time, I didn't spend my energy, I didn't spend any effort thinking about the fact that I was the only woman in the room. It's something I've talked about since then because I've been asked, but at the time, I didn't waste my energy on that. It also has always struck me as very crazy, if you will, to walk into a room, a meeting, a business meeting, a locker room meeting, a meeting of Raider owners or NFL team owners, or a meeting with banks or municipality representatives, thinking about my gender, if my expectation and hope was that nobody else would be thinking about my gender. In other words, how do I walk into a room expecting no one there to be concerned with my gender if all the while I'm thinking about my gender? And by the way, I'm not going to waste my time thinking about my gender. If you want to think about it, go ahead, waste your time. I'm going to think about passing the test.
Yeah, I love that. Now, during the NFL's, I guess, commemoration of its 100-year anniversary, you were named as one of the top 100 greatest game changers in NFL history. How does it feel to gain that recognition?
I was overwhelmed. I had no idea that was coming. I had no idea. Not only did I not have an expectation or any hope, it never, ever crossed my mind that I would be included in that list. And when I learned of it, someone sent me a note and I learned of it and I went online, they sent me a link. And I'll share with you. I've shared this with a few people, not with everyone. When I learned that, I cried. I was so overwhelmed. I cried. And then the funny part is I called my husband at his office and I was crying when I called him because I wanted to share the news and I choked it out. And he said, that's terrific, but could you never call me sobbing again? Because I thought someone died. So that's the funny end of that story, but I was overwhelmed by that. It was very, very, very meaningful.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, you paved the way for so many women, whether you kind of knew it at the time or not. And obviously, we've seen more women now coming into the NFL within the last decade. What do you kind of make of that increase and how would you like to see it even further progress?
I would like it to no longer be newsworthy when that happens. And, I'll explain that a little further by noting that when a woman is advanced, promoted, given an opportunity that women had not been previously afforded, whether it's on the sideline as an assistant coach or on the field as an official or in the executive offices, I'm routinely asked if I'm excited. And the answer is what I will explain right now, which is sure, I'm excited. But what is going to be truly exciting is when these things are no longer newsworthy, when people are hired without regard to race, gender, ethnicity, and all the other individualities which have no bearing whatsoever on whether one can do a job. When this happens regularly and in all businesses, that's going to be the most exciting.
Yeah. What do you think needs to happen for it to no longer be that conversation and for it to just be natural?
If I knew the answer to that, I would be blasting it across the globe. Look, I hope that there's something akin to business Darwinism, and that businesses that do not hire without regard to race, gender, and the other individualities I noted, which have no bearing whatsoever on whether one can do a job, I hope they fail, because by definition, they should. If you are excluding from consideration and from hiring vast swaths of people because of those individualities, you deserve to fail because you are eliminating tremendously qualified people from consideration. Beyond that, businesses which are diverse and which are inclusive are going to be better businesses because they're going to include a wide variety of views and thoughts and ideas and suggestions. That's the way the world should work.
And, we've got the Rooney Rule, which exists within the NFL. Do you think, an equivalent, a female equivalent, is something that maybe the NFL would benefit from?
Look, I remember I was in the league when the Rooney Rule was put in place. And the fact is, there should not need to be a rule to get people to do the right thing. Unfortunately, we do need rules to get people to do the right thing. So the rules should be broad and inclusive, and it should apply to, race, gender, ethnicity, religion, religious choices, everything. But I do understand why the Rooney Rule is specific. One would hope there doesn't need to be a rule in other regards. But again, I think the best organizations are going to be those that embrace diversity and inclusiveness and don't need a rule to do it. And the happy news is that a number of organizations, a number of NFL teams are putting in place pipelines for women to join the organization and advance within it. Look, you don't wake up one day and say, I'm going to be the CEO today, or I'm going to be the head coach today, or I'm going to be the GM today. You need to work your way into those roles. And the only way to do so is to start at a more junior level. Well, a number of teams have put in place pipelines to enable that. And I will name California teams simply because I'm sitting in California right now. The 49ers have done this. The Rams have done this. There are other teams as well, but I'm a California girl, so I named California teams. And that's what's going to give women an opportunity to advance, is to be able to come in and work their way through that pipeline.
Yeah. And I think that's what I really admire about the female forum that the NFL run, the women in NFL. I think that's something that's, really positive. And you see coaches like Bruce Arians, who's really keen on that. And obviously there's other coaches around the NFL as well. So I do feel like it's moving in the right direction. But like you say, I kind of hope for the day where it's no longer, a conversation and, that we're not highlighting the firsts anymore and it's just normal.
Well, exactly. And, let's take a moment and recognize that the NFL put Sarah Thomas on the field last year as an official. And numerous people said to me, well, Aim, are they just doing that for show? Or are they just doing that for brownie points or political correctness? And I laughed every time I was asked that, because I will tell you, and I will assure you, that the very last thing the National Football League wants is for officiating in the Super Bowl to be a subject. Yeah. So the league is only going to put on that field the very best officials, and Sarah Thomas earned that spot.
Yeah, she was just in London at the weekend, actually. And I was really excited because I looked down and I was like way up in the gods, but I looked down and I was like, oh my God, there's a female referee on the pitch in the UK. I was so excited that she was here. So, yeah. And like you said, hopefully there comes a day where there's more of that and it's just not even a thought anymore.
Exactly.
Now, over, I guess, the course of your career, how have you seen things like player safety change? And do you think the NFL is moving in the right direction?
Well, certainly things have changed a lot since I entered the league, and they've changed a lot since the years before I entered the league. Look, there used to be the forearm shiver. You used to be able to clobber people in the head. And I'm not suggesting that those should, that those are missed. But yes, the league has changed rules a lot to protect players. It is a contact sport. It is, in fact, a collision sport. And early in my career, I was standing on the sidelines during practice and I was entertaining some of our business partners. And I made that comment about the game. I said, this is a contact sport. And one of our players said very nicely and very, conversationally and jumped in the conversation, which was terrific because that was exciting for the business partners. And he said, Aim, it's not just a contact sport. It's a collision sport. And at that time, that was the case. I mean, the rules back then, the way safeties could run over the middle, quarterbacks weren't protected the way they are now. So yes, the league has made changes and is taking steps to make it a safer game, but it is a collision sport.
Yeah. How do you feel about the current taunting and personal foul rules? Would you say that they're improving the game?
I would say that if I were still in the league right now, under the current taunting rule, I would be penalized every game. So I understand what the league is trying to achieve. I also know I would have gotten those letters every week. And by the way, I did get some of those letters during my career from the league office, chastising me for my in-game behavior, where I may not have been the most diplomatic with respect to league officials and observers that were there. But look, I'd have been getting flagged every week, or if not flagged, and I'm being silly about that because I wasn't on the field, but I do understand what the league is trying to achieve, but I think the pendulum has swung too far. There is a difference between excitement and exuberance and celebration and taunting. And I think it's very intellectually inconsistent and unfair to say to players, be exuberant, play with passion. We expect you to play passionately and with just be fierce and passionate and ferocious. And then, but the minute the play's over, just stop, go back to behavior as if you were in a library. It is a game in which emotion plays a tremendous part. And we expect players on the teams we love, and maybe players in general, to play with emotion. Well, it's hard to turn that emotion on and off. So I do think the pendulum has swung too far. And as in most things with the league, perhaps it will swing back.
Now, your book, You Negotiate Like a Girl, it sits in pure pride on my shelves. How was that process of writing all this into your book? Because obviously you've got so much experience, so many stories to tell. How was that?
Well, thank you very much. First of all, I thank you for having that book. And I thank you for your very nice comments. I love to write. I really love to write. When I was a kid and we go through those, this is what I'm going to be when I grow up. This is what I'm going to be when I grow up. And even when I was older than just a kid, I thought, well, maybe I'll be a writer. And there was a period of time I thought, maybe I'll write spy novels like Agatha Christie, or I'll be like Jessica Fletcher in Murder, She Wrote, or then there was a period of time I thought, well, maybe I'll be a journalist. I didn't go that path, but I love to write. And what I did was I just wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. And having never written a book, I asked Mike Freeman, who's terrific, would he help me turn it into a book? And he did. And it was a lot of fun to write.
And do you think you'd be up for writing another book at some point?
I might. I would like to write a kid's book. So that might be my next. And I promise not to use the same language in my kids' book as I did in this book.
Yeah, wouldn't advise that one. Now, when you look back at your time in the NFL and your time with the Raiders, is there like one moment that you say you feel particularly most proud of?
I don't know that there's a particular moment that makes me feel particularly that way. One of the things that I did while with the organization, it wasn't a moment, but it was something I had in mind for quite a while and was ultimately able to bring to fruition, which is settling all the litigation that existed between the Raiders and the league. And I always go into full 8-year-old mode when I say that, because whenever I talk about the litigation, because I have to immediately say, we didn't start it, Mom. And I'm not referring to you as mom, of course, but I feel like the 8-year-old who says to his or her mom, I didn't start it. It wasn't my fault. But yes, we were the defendant in that litigation. And I always reference that because I have an inner 8-year-old in me. But I spent a long time trying to convince Al that resolving all that litigation, settling it, was the right thing to do, and that litigation is not a good business strategy. And it was a very, very special moment for me when ultimately we were able to settle everything. And I brought into Al in his office all of the settlement documents for him to sign, all the settlement agreements. And he, before signing, looked up at me and said, I'm doing this for you, kid. And I still get very emotional when I think about that, because it wasn't in his nature to settle, and he didn't want to settle, but he did settle because I was so passionate about I shared so passionately my views about how important it was.
I love that. Well, listen, Amy, you have been fascinating as ever to speak to, and I could literally chat to you all day.
I am such a big fan of yours and such a big fan of your work. And beyond being a fan of yours and a fan of your work, it is an absolute delight to speak with you. So I too could speak with you more, and I hope we get to do so on another occasion.
Absolutely. Oh, well, thank you so much for taking the time out to speak to me today, Amy.
And by the way, should you make it to Los Angeles for the Super Bowl this year, ice cream's on me.
Amy, if I can make it to the Super Bowl, I would be the happiest person in the world. That will hopefully happen one day. And then Deal. Worst case scenario, I do want to do a West Coast trip as across all of the West Coast next year. So either way, we will get that ice cream.
and it will be my treat.
I can't wait. I don't know what more I can say. Amy is amazing, and I totally fangirled through that whole interview. Anyhow, that's it for another episode of the Cleats Off podcast. As always, I'd love your comments and feedback, so feel free to reach out to me at NFL Girl UK across Twitter, Facebook or Instagram. And finally, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. I wouldn't want you to miss a single episode. Until next time, thanks for listening.